Okay, so we are about to finish the chapter today. So before discussing fluid movement at the capillary bed, I'm going to explain you about the ECG because this topic is connected with our next chapter, which we're going to start in a while in today's class. So I'll explain you first ECG and then I'll come back to this topic and then we will continue with the chapter number 12, the lymphatic system. I've already uploaded the presentation on Moodle. Did you see the presentation? And I have uploaded plenty of videos on the cardiovascular system, right? That also I uploaded it. Yes, so there's a folder for the videos, okay? About the cardiovascular system. We'll move on to the EKG first, okay? And EKG is like, this topic is actually very, very difficult to comprehend. And, this topic is very comprehensive actually. But we will basically, just know the introduction about the EKG. We're not going into details of the EKG. We'll go as per your book. Okay. And even the time does not permit us, we really don't have time, right? We have been already doing the cardiovascular system from past 3 weeks, more than 3 weeks, right? So, uh, so whatever I'm going to teach you, only that much is required, and that much is mentioned in your book. So we're not going into details. So what is ECG, also called as an EKG? And you also did a lab on Thursday about EKG, right? So what happened, how this came into existence, the EKG, what happened, various physiologists, they discovered at the end of the 19th century, they discovered that if we can place an electrode, okay, on our skin surface, okay, and those electrodes can actually record the electrical activity of the heart, okay. That was discovered long back, okay, in 19th century, okay. And that placing an electron on the skin surface and recording the heart's activity was possible only because in our body we have various salt solutions like your sodium chloride, okay. If you are a chemist, you know that you would have studied in chemistry that in the salt solution electricity can easily pass through it, it's a good conductor of electricity, right? So is our body, because in our extracellular fluid we have salt solution like sodium chloride, right? That makes us a good conductor of electricity. Are we okay till now? Okay, so we already spoke about that. I'm not going to details of this. We already spoke about the intrinsic conduction system of the heart, how your SA node generates the electricity in the heart, the depolarization waves and the action potentials, right? So we'll not go into details. We discussed that previously, right? So what happened? The first ECG was recorded in 1887, right? But what happened? But the procedure was not finalized, okay, until the beginning of the 20th century, okay. So in ECG, we simply try to capture the electrical activity generated by these intrinsic conduction systems, whether we have the SA node, AV node, bundle of hairs, bundle branches, Purkinje's fiber, right? And and then try to basically generate an electrocardiogram, right? So so that is basically an electrocardiogram is basically a recording of the electrical activity initiated in the intrinsic conduction system of the heart, which we all previously learned about it, right? So basically you can simply say the flow of charges which takes place here, okay. So it across the cell membrane, right, it generates the electric current, right? And now this is something which you need to know the definitions of all the waves over here, right? So you might have seen, if you have seen an ACG, it has, it looks something like this, it has, plenty of waves on it, okay, which you're not aware of what those waves are. We'll just try to know the basics of it, okay. The first wave which we see over here is a P wave, this one. Okay, so what is this P wave? This P wave is simply telling us that it is the depolarization of the atria, the P wave. Okay, for example, the action potential was generated or fired by the SA node, right? Then we discussed how it spreads out to the left atrium, okay, and through the internodal pathway it's sent to the AV node, right? Then there's a pause till the atria will finish contracting, right? So P wave simply tells you that the depolarization of the atria, which has spread to both the atria, and after depolarization, there will be the contraction of the atria. So simply atrial depolarization is nothing but the atrial contraction. So atria will get depolarized first, and then the atria will contract, of course, right? And then we have this QRS, a bigger complex, which you see here, QRS complex, this bigger wave which you see over here. Okay, this QRS complex simply tells us that now the action potential has reached to the ventricles, right? It tells us about the depolarization of both the ventricles, which is followed by the ventricular contraction. After that, the ventricles will contract, right? So knowing how big the ventricles are as compared to the atria, look at this. This is the QRST, ventricular contraction. Okay, so we'll not do the duration, anything. We'll not do all that stuff. We'll just, as I said, that we'll just define the peaks, and that is all. Nothing in detail. And then we have another wave called as a T wave. Okay, T wave tells us, okay, now atria has contracted, atria finished the systole, sorry, ventricles finished the systole, right? And now ventricles need to relax. Okay, so there will be a repolarization in the ventricles. Okay, so T wave tells us simply the ventricular repolarization and followed by relaxation of the ventricles, right? Or diastole of the ventricles. That is about the T wave, the P, QRS, and the T wave. But nobody asked me a question. Okay, in between, do you think there's any wave which is missing over here? Nobody asked me about that. Do you think there's something which I didn't explain it to you, or which is missing in this wave? Yes, what is it, Rani? Very good. What is it? Did we speak about what? Atrial repolarization. Absolutely. You didn't ask me about what about atrial repolarization? We know that atria contracts, right? But then there should be a wave for the atrial repolarization where atrias are relaxing. I mean, atria are relaxing, right? But what happens? The atrial repolarization is definitely there, right? But it is not being recorded over here. Okay, it's undetected over here. Okay, and there are two reasons for it. Why there is no way for atrial repolarization? Reason number one is because of its low intensity. Knowing how smaller the atria are, point number one, right? But then the point number two is because right after the atria contracts, right, it's the time when the ventricles have to contract. Okay, the ventricular depolarization will take place, right? So what happens due to due to high intensity of this QRS complex, due to high intensity of the ventricular depolarization, okay, or high intensity of the QRS complex, right? What happens? The atrial repolarization is hidden, okay, or you can say that the QRS basic complex masks the what? Atrial repolarization. Okay, or you can say that when the ventricular excitation takes place, right, what happens at the same time? The atrias are also repolarizing, so it's kind of, it's overlapped over here, it's masked over here, it's obscure over here, right? So that is why you cannot see the atrial repolarization. That is all you need to know. You need to know the diagram is in the book. You need to know all the definitions of all this. And then what do we use it for, right? So we know that abnormal ECG means there's something wrong with the heart, right? So ECG is used to detect any damage in our intrinsic conduction system or with our heart, right? So whenever there is a cardiac muscle which is damaged, whatever the reason is, okay, if the cardiac muscle cells are damaged, right, the electrical impulses will not be normal. They will not flow normally. They will not take the normal pathway, right? And that results in the abnormal ECG. So that is detected by the ECG. So whether a patient is having a tachycardia, heart attack, bradycardia, coronary arterial disease, any fibrillation, right? All these things can be recorded in the ECG. And there are certain other things also involved here, right? For example, there is something called as, I'll not discuss all that. That will be too much for, there are, the waves, PQRS waves, the segments, PR segment, ST segment. So I will not discuss all that. You'll be confused and it's not even required. It's not there in your book. So no need to know about all that, right? So that was about the ECG, right? We discussed all that. Now, the blood pressure. We already discussed about the blood pressure, but I had given you homework on Wednesday. Okay. How many of you are ready with the answers? Some of you have sent me an email. I really appreciate that and have replied to your emails with the excellent and very good and all, right? So, other than people have already replied to my send me an email, that's okay, but that we're going to discuss about if you remember, I had asked you a question about orthostatic blood pressure. I told you when we stand up, okay, from the sitting position, we might feel a little dizzy, right? We might get a syncope. Why is that? That was my question which I had asked you on Wednesday. So ready with the answers, guys? Let me. Gada KL Muhin. Can you share your answer with me? You can either switch on your mic or you can just reply it in the chat box. Gada. Quickly, because we need to start a new chapter. Gada, are you connected? I have a pen handy and a paper handy with me. Okay, you don't know are you ready with the answer? Gada? Did you try to Google it? Or see any textbook? You know that the 5% is not only for your attendance, the 5% is also class participation. It's okay, Gada, no problem. Even if it's wrong, no problem, don't worry about it. I'm here to correct you, don't worry at all. What is important is that what have you performed your homework or not? That is important for me. I'm here to make you understand, don't worry. Yes, Gada, please go ahead. Don't worry, I'm here to correct you, don't worry. Go ahead with your answer. We all are waiting, Gada. Okay, Gadir Al Ruwais. Yes, Gadir. Do you have the answer for the question? Gadir. Gadir Al Ruwais. You're not connected, that means. Okay. After that, who else we have? Huda Al Ainzi. Huda, do you have the answer? Yes, dear. Do you have the answer for the question? Why is there a sudden drop in the blood pressure? Quickly, dear. Okay, you're not sure. Even if you're not sure, it's perfectly okay. You need to participate. As I said that, I'm here to correct you all. Gravity causes blood to pool in your legs, which decreases the blood pressure because there's a less blood circulation to your heart. Very good. Okay, so you didn't do your homework. I was waiting for you. Even if the answer was incorrect, I was still waiting for your answer. Huda. Noor did not, Gadir did not reply, and uh, Reem Al Uraid. Reem Al Uraid. Could you please answer this question, dear? Noor, you're absolutely correct, dear. Thank you. Thank you. But the question goes to Reem. When a person stands or sets up and your cardiac response is triggered, the heartbeat stronger and faster, and the arteries and veins constrict. This makes both the systolic and so that the brain and the heart arteries can continue to receive the necessary. Absolutely correct. Yes, Noora. Thank you, Noora. Pulling of the blood because the blood pressure in the head is less. Very good, Shatha. Absolutely, you're correct. I'm still waiting for Reem Al Urai to answer. I'm going to write your name. As I said, that if you don't reply, your attendance will be marked absent. Even if you don't know the answer, you're supposed to reply Reem. Reem. Right. So please answer. Okay. Thank you. Very good, Shadha. Very good, Noora. Is there anybody else who wants to switch on the mic and volunteer and explain the answer? Anybody who wants to switch on the mic? Raneem, do you want to switch on the mic and answer the question?
Good morning, doctor.
Good morning. Yes, dear. Please go ahead.
So when
Could you
you
please
stand up
say
really
here?
quickly,
Please go ahead. Sorry.
when you stand up, the gravity pulls
Mm-hmm.
blood down to your legs, and it starts pulling in the lower half of your body, and it
Absolutely.
decreases the blood flow to your heart, so your blood pressure drops.
Okay, wonderful. So, very good. Absolutely. Your answer is absolutely correct. So, how will our body respond? If you remember, we spoke about the baroreceptor reflux that day, right? So how does our body respond to this low blood pressure thing? What is the response from our body? You're absolutely correct.
Uh, it tries to raise the blood pressure.
Okay, very good. Absolutely. But how?
I'm not really sure.
It's okay. Don't worry. I will explain. Thank you. Thank you, dear. Thank you, dear, for volunteering. Thank you. Okay, again, someone who's rising from lying down. Absolutely, Hadil. Okay, let me explain you. Let me see. I have a couple of answers more, but I think because of the bleeding. Okay, so Raneem explained it very beautifully that what exactly happens when we suddenly stand up when we are in a sleeping position or in a or in a sitting position. If you stand up suddenly, what she said is that when you stand up, the blood is being pulled down because of the gravity, right, down in the legs. Okay, so as a result, when blood has pooled in the legs, as a result, the blood pressure you know goes down. So what does that mean? That means less blood is being sent to the brain, right? As the heart is sending less blood to the brain, obviously the person might feel syncopic or person might feel dizzy. That is one part of the answer. That's absolutely correct. Now what happens? How will your body, or how will the baroreceptor reflux respond to it? If you remember, we spoke about the baroreceptors present in your internal carotid arteries, and in your major artery, like your aorta, right? So when the baroreceptors, when these stretch receptors detect this less blood pressure in the body, what do? They simply send the response to the brain, to the medulla oblongata, right? So in return, how will your brain respond? In return, it's not only your brain, your autonomic nervous system, but also your heart, your cardiovascular system also responds. How will they respond? The response from the autonomic nervous system, from the sympathetic nervous system will be, if you remember, we spoke about, it will cause vasoconstriction. Remember, sympathetic nervous system causes vasoconstriction because they're all supplying your what? Your smooth muscles. So as there will be a vasoconstriction, automatically the blood pressure will increase. As the blood pressure will increase, more blood will be sent to the brain, and you will be, within few seconds, you'll be all okay, right? And at the same time, your heart starts responding a little faster. The contraction rate of your heart increases because if you remember, the sympathetic nervous system also innervates our SA node, right? So your body responds it by simply causing vasoconstriction and increasing the heart rate. So within no time, you will feel all okay. Within few seconds, you will feel all okay. And this is called as the what? Orthostatic blood pressure, or the hypotension which changes when we change the position of the body. Is it clear? The Gada says autosomal and due to the fluid shifts. The transition from the supine to the standing causes a drop in the artery. Yes, absolutely. All clear. Is it clear, Rani, now? How the body, the two, there were two parts, right? One was, yes, why does it happen? Then the second part was how your body responds to this low blood pressure. Okay. Thank you all who all have sent me an email. Thank you for all that. And that shows your participation. People who already wrote the answers over here. Thank you for all that, right? Because you know that it's not only about the attendance, the participation in the class is equally important. Okay. And so this is about the blood pressure. We already discussed about it. So you can just read the slide. What is the normal blood pressure and what is hypotension and the hypertension, right? So moving on to the last topic of this chapter, which is further interconnected with our next chapter, is basically this part, right? So in this part, what happens, we're going to discuss about how the fluid movement takes place from the capillary. So we have cells present over here, okay? And these cells need oxygen, these cells need nutrients, right? So the blood which comes from the heart is rich in the nutrients, right? So what happens? So when the blood is coming from the heart, right, it has definitely high blood pressure, isn't it? It has definitely high blood pressure. So at the arterial end, this is called as an arterial end. This is what is the venous end of the capillary. This is venous end of the capillary. This is arterial end of the capillary. So we usually say at the arterial end of the capillary, the blood pressure is more because blood has recently come from the heart, right? And blood pressure is more, not only the blood pressure is more, which further basically also explains that at this point of the capillary the hydrostatic pressure is more. What is the hydrostatic pressure? Hydrostatic pressure is simply the force exerted. If I have a fluid in this straw, okay, or in this blood vessel, right? So what is the hydrostatic pressure? The fluid which is present in this blood vessel, or the fluid which is present in the straw or any container, right? It exerts some amount of pressure to the walls, right? To the walls of the container. So similarly, the force which is exerted by our blood on the walls of the blood vessels is called as the hydrostatic pressure. Okay. So we were just talking about there will be high blood pressure here or high hydrostatic pressure here because the blood is exerting more force on the walls of the capillaries, right? So as a result, what happens, because of this high blood pressure, it generates a huge amount of force. So as a result, the things which are present in the plasma, the things which are present in the blood, like your oxygen diffuses out, your nutrients which are present in the blood, they diffuse out, right? So it happens because here we have more blood pressure, and here in the interstitial fluid, there is less blood pressure, right? So what happens, this is basically called as a filtration. Okay, so what happens, as oxygen and the nutrients travel from the blood, okay, it's not only oxygen and nutrients which travel, some amount of plasma also travels along with this, because blood pressure is so very high, the plasma which was present in the blood, it also travels in outside the blood vessel. So yellow one is a plasma, right? So look at this. This plasma is now in the interstitial spaces between the cells. Okay. So what happens now? Blood, as it's moving further, okay, as blood is moving further, okay, oxygen and carbon dioxide are, exchange and everything is happening. Now, blood, as it moves away from the arteries, the blood pressure is slowly and slowly going to decrease. By the time the blood reaches over here to the venous end, blood pressure has dropped down, which I already explained to you earlier, right? Veins are at low blood pressure. Okay, so at this end the blood pressure is very low, but there's something which remains constant throughout. Okay, that is the osmotic pressure. Recall your chapter blood, when we started the chapter blood. Do you remember when I was explaining you about the plasma proteins? Do you remember I told you that within the blood, we have larger proteins like your albumins, like your plasma proteins. They're too big in the blood that they can never cross these spaces within the blood capillaries. And thanks to these albumins or plasma proteins, if you remember, I told you that they are responsible for keeping the fluid within the blood vessels, because they always maintain high solute concentration within the blood. Look at this, what is happening. So now, as I said, that there's low blood pressure over here, but what remains constant is the osmotic pressure of the blood, because no matter what happens, if you have these, plasma proteins present here, those plasma proteins will still remain in the blood vessels, right? Even if some of them can move out, couple of them can move out, but usually plasma proteins stay in the blood, maintaining the solute level in the blood. Look at this. So that is why I said that osmotic pressure will not change, it will same, because blood proteins do not leave the blood, they stay within the capillaries, maintaining the solute within the blood. Okay. Now look at this. As the plasma has escaped, so there's a lot of plasma over here, but now we call it interstitial fluid. Now tell me which one is hypertonic and which one is hypotonic, guys? Chapter number 3. Where do we have more water? Here or within the blood? So which one will travel where? Remember osmosis? Yes, what will happen now? Since we have more interstitial fluid over here and the solute concentration is less, but inside the blood vessels, we still have plasma proteins. So inside here, it will be hypertonic or hypotonic at this point, at the venous end. Will it be hypertonic or hypotonic, guys? Chapter number 3. No, Hadid. Why hypotonic inside? It's hypertonic because I told you that within the blood vessels, the albumin is still there, right? So the solute is more, water is less, isn't it? Yes, very good. So inside here it will be hypertonic, right? This is hypertonic, and here it will be hypotonic, right? Because there's more water. So remember osmosis, Water will travel from an area of higher concentration to the area of lower concentration. That is what happens at the venous end. Whatever water you lost at the beginning, right, that same water is reclaimed back. It's brought back into the blood by the osmosis. Are we okay with this? Look at this. Here, things are moving out. The plasma is moving out of the cells at the atrial end. By the time it reaches to the venous end, the fluid is brought back in by the process called as osmosis. Are we okay? So the osmotic pressure and the blood pressure is very, very important. Things, the fluid move in and out through the blood vessels by these two very important processes. But then the thing is that, okay, once the fluid is brought back in, okay, there will be a time when, the fluid movement will be equalized here and here, right? So at that time, the net movement of water will stop, or a plasma will stop into the blood vessels, right? So what will happen at that time? What will happen now? But we still have fluid outside. We want that fluid back. We still have some amount of fluid outside and we want that fluid back. How can we get that fluid back into the blood? Because we know that it belongs to the blood, it is the blood plasma, and we need it back to the blood. Then comes your another system which is called as a lymphatic system. So whatever fluid was lost here, and if some amount of fluid is left behind here, it is your lymphatic system, the chapter which we're going to start, that will bring this lost fluid back to the blood vessels. So we're going to discuss now the lymphatic system. Restoring lost fluid from the capillaries back to the circulatory system is one of the major functions of the lymphatic system. I'm going to upload the next chapter. Give me a minute. Is it clear till now, guys? Did you see how your circulatory system is connected with your lymphatic system? None of the systems can work all alone. Every system is connected to each other. Okay, look at it. I'll show you the diagram here because the beginning of the chapter is the same thing, what we learned in the circulatory system, right? That's why I connected the two chapters. Look at this. I'll show you a diagram. Look at this. Do you see the same capillary bed? The green ones which you see here belong to your what? Belong to your lymphatic system. These are your lymphatic capillaries. So whatever fluid was left out, the yellow one, even if there's some amount of fluid which is still in the interstitial spaces, right? So need not to worry. That fluid you will see that will be brought by your lymphatic system into the lymph vessels. The way we have blood vessels, similarly we have the lymph vessels, right? And this lymphatic system will finally, I'll show you the lymphatic vessels of the body. Look at this. The green ones which you see here, they're all lymphatic vessels of your body, right? And they all collect the lost fluid, okay, in the interstitial spaces and bring that fluid back to the circulatory system. But where and how? If you remember, once the whole fluid is collected from the body, these lymphatic vessels, okay, they enter in, if you remember, we spoke about subclavian vein here. This is a subclavian vein, right? This is an internal carotid vein, right? Artery. Guys, do you remember the subclavian vein? Yes, right? And then we have the jugular vein, right? If you see here, this is an internal jugular vein here. In between the two, there will be your duct, which we'll talk about in a while, right? the bigger lymphatic vessel called as a lymphatic duct, which will pour the blood between these two, between the jugular vein and between the subclavian vein. And this fluid will be then part of the blood once again. It will be again called as a plasma. Is it clear till now? If I ask you a question now, what is the origin of the lymph fluid? Remember that what is a lymph? Okay, remember that it is the same fluid with different names. Please pay attention, everyone. When this fluid was within the blood, okay, we call this fluid as a plasma. When this fluid, let me use a yellow color, when this fluid was within the blood, we called it plasma. When this fluid went outside the blood vessels, it stayed in the interstitial spaces over here. We called this fluid as an interstitial fluid. Okay. When this fluid was taken in by the lymphatic capillaries, when this fluid entered from the interstitial fluid into lymphatic capillaries, we call this fluid as a lymph. Just remember, it's the same fluid, but with different names depending upon the location where it is present. When this fluid is present in the blood, we call it plasma. When it goes out in the interstitial spaces, we call it the interstitial fluid. When the same fluid enters into the lymphatic capillaries, we call it a lymph. Okay, but the difference here is the plasma is very rich in plasma proteins. If you remember, I told you that proteins do not leave the blood vessels, right? Very smaller amount, or maybe a couple of proteins might leave. Usually they all stay in the blood vessels, right? So if somebody will ask you what is the difference between the plasma and the lymph, you will say that plasma is along with the plasma proteins, while as in the lymph you have no plasma proteins or very less plasma proteins. Are we okay, guys? Can you answer this question now? What is the origin of the lymph fluid? The lymph which circulates throughout our lymphatic system, right? What is its origin? See, it circulates throughout our lymphatic system. Its origin is see, it circulates throughout our body. Plasma or blood, absolutely wonderful, isn't it? Okay, and so we can say that restoring the lost fluid from the capillaries back to the circulatory system is one of the major functions. It's the first and foremost function of the lymphatic system. Now my question is, can we feel pulse in the lymphatic vessels? The way we have blood vessels, we have arteries, arterioles, capillaries, right? Similarly, in the lymphatic vessels, we'll soon talk about the lymphatic capillaries. Okay, then we have collecting vessels, then we have lymphatic trunk, and then finally the bigger ones called as a lymphatic duct, right? So, do we have blood pressure in the lymphatic vessels? Yes or no? Or do we have pulse rate? The way we see pulse in the blood vessels. Can you feel the pulse in lymphatic vessels? No. Very good, Rani, Noor. Why not, Shadha? Why not? Why can't we feel pulse in the lymphatic vessels? Anybody? The heart is absolute. There's no pumping. Wonderful. There's no pumping at all. We feel the pulse. Very good. We feel the pulse in the blood vessels because heart is pumping the blood, right? But the lymph flowing through the lymphatic vessel, there's no pumping action of the heart. Okay. Now the question says that when lymph flows throughout our body, is it a one-way system or a two-way system? The way we learned in the when we discussed the blood, blood circulation within the heart, we said that how the blood from the right ventricle goes through the pulmonary vein and then goes where, pulmonary artery, and goes where, goes to the lungs, and then from the lungs it returns back to the pulmonary veins into the left atrium. It makes a loop, right? What about the lymph? So is it a one-way system or a two-way system? Two-way, how come? One-way system. Lymph only flows towards the heart. If you remember, I just told you that once we collect the lymph from the entire body, this lymph is poured into the vein and it becomes part of the superior vena cava and then enters into the right atrium. Khalas. Okay. From the other side, the lymph is not being pumped at all. Okay. And second thing which you need to know here is if you compare the lymphatic capillaries with the blood capillaries. Yes, Gada, absolutely. Gad, it's one way circulatory system, yes. Okay. If you compare here, if you see the green ones are lymphatic capillaries. So they're all dead ended. Look at this. What do you mean by dead ended? If you see here, they are not connected with anything else. So it's just a one way system. If you see here, we have an artery. The blood comes from the heart through the artery, then the arterioles, then the capillary bed, then the venules and veins, right? So you can see that the smaller blood vessels are fed by the arteries and the blood takes away by the venules, but there's nothing like that. It's just a one-way system here. The lymphatic capillaries are not fed by the arteries like your blood capillaries. So lymph flows only towards the heart, not out of the heart. Okay, because its source is this interstitial fluid, the lost fluid. So it travels into these lymphatic capillaries. Are we okay till now? So we cannot feel the pulse in the lymphatic vessels. Okay. Now, the lymphatic system is basically when we talk about in this chapter, the part one of this chapter is about the lymphatic system, about the lymph, how it travels all the way through our body. What are the lymphatic vessels? Okay, the lymphatic tissues and organs of the body. And then we move on to the second part of the chapter, which is the immune system, the immune cells of our body. Okay. So we'll first talk about the lymphatic vessels in this chapter. Okay, the various lymphatic vessels I told you about. I showed you the diagram, the capillaries, you know, the collecting vessels, right over here. I think there was one more diagram in your text. Here, look at this. The capillary, these are the lymphatic vessels, the capillaries, okay, and then you have the collecting vessels, okay, and then you have the lymphatic trunk, the bigger ones, and the largest of all are your lymphatic ducts, which finally bring the blood into the veins. Okay, so that's what we're going to talk about first. And then we're going to talk about, maybe in tomorrow's class, we'll talk about the lymphoid tissues. Okay, we're going to talk about what are the various lymphoid tissues, okay, which are made up of phagocytic cells and lymphocytes. We'll also talk about lymphoid organs like your lymph nodes, how they purify the lymph, how they clean the lymph. Okay, how they kill the microorganisms or cancer cells present in the lymph. Okay, then we're going to talk about spleen as a lymphoid organ, thymus, tonsils, pairs, patches. Okay, that will be the second part of it. We start with the lymphoid vessels. And in the lymphoid vessels, we start with the lymphoid capillaries. So these are all we're going to talk about. Okay, so we'll today's and tomorrow's topic will be based on all this. Okay, and then we move on to the lymphoid organs. Okay, so lymphatic vessels, we're talking about lymphatic vessels first, and we start with the lymphatic capillaries, and we'll try to find out what is the difference between the lymphatic capillaries and the blood capillaries. Okay, so we just learned that the lymphatic vessels, the main function of the lymphatic vessels are basically to pick up the excess or leaked fluid, and if some proteins have moved out of the blood vessels, okay, and return that fluid back to the blood, is one of the first and foremost function of these lymphatic vessels. Okay, now we just learned about these lymphatic capillaries. As I told you that they are blind ended, point number one. If you compare the lymphatic capillaries and the blood capillary, you will say that lymphatic capillaries are blind ended, while as the blood capillaries are connected to they're fed by the arteries, okay, supplied by the arteries, and then they unite to form the venules. So this is the difference number one. Difference number two, which one is more permeable? Is it blood capillary or the lymphatic vessels? You will see that lymphatic vessels are so very permeable. Sometimes, even if you have a bacteria present over here, a cancerous cell present over here, virus present over here, along with the fluid, they also travel into the lymphatic capillaries. But we don't need to worry about it, because you will see in a while that this lymph will be sent to the lymph nodes, and lymph nodes will try to capture those cancerous cells, will try to capture those bacteria or viruses, and will send the filtered lymph back to the blood, right? So this is an important function of the lymph nodes, which we'll talk about maybe in tomorrow's class. So which one is more permeable, guys? Blood vessels or lymphatic vessels? Okay, very good. Okay, now what about, we also have valves present in the, since they are very thin walled, this difference number three, they're thin walled, okay, even though they look similar to the veins, right, or the blood vessels, but they are very, they're strong, they're very, very thin walled, right? And look at this. These lymphatic capillaries, they're provided with smaller, you know, valves. If you see here, the micro valves we call them, or mini valves we call them. Look at this. And these valves are further connected with the connective tissue, okay, which hold them or which attach them to the surrounding, interstitial spaces over here. Okay, so what happens, let's say, okay, there was a blood capillary here. Okay, let me get the red one. Let's say there was a blood capillary over here, okay, and lot of plasma was lost from the blood capillary into the interstitial spaces. So as a result, there will be plenty of plasma where, plenty of plasma in the interstitial spaces. Look at this. So as there is a lot of plasma over here in the interstitial spaces, they put a pressure on these, on these thread-like things, on these thread-like attachments. Okay. So they try to put a pressure on these filaments and they open. As these filaments open, it opens the valve and fluid moves into the lymphatic capillaries. Now, fluid is inside the lymphatic capillaries. Let me erase the outer one now. So now the fluid which was present in the interstitial spaces, it has moved into the lymphatic capillaries. So as it has moved inside the lymphatic capillaries, okay, the amount of lymph is more within the lymphatic vessels. So because of that higher pressure, okay, because of that higher pressure, these valves are what? These valves will be closed. Okay, these valves will be closed. As they will be closed, the lymph will not be allowed to go back into the interstitial spaces. That is how lymph enters into the lymphatic blood vessels. Are we okay? So as I told you that sometimes there's a cell debris, bacteria, viruses, they can also enter the lymphatic capillaries, because look at this, how permeable they are. The whole flap opens up and things can easily move into. So there's not only the plasma which moves into it, or interstitial fluid which moves into the lymphatic capillary. As I said, that the viruses, cancerous cells, right, debris, that can also move into the lymphatic vessels, and but that will be further cleaned off or cleared off. Are we okay till now? Now, what will happen? These lymphatic capillaries, okay, they all will unite. The way we said that blood capillaries unite, okay, and then they form the venules. Same thing. These lymphatic capillaries, they unite to form the lymphatic vessels, okay. And then finally, what happens? I'll show the diagram over here. Look at this diagram. So these smaller capillaries join together, okay, and then they form something called as the collecting vessels. As you can see here, these are collecting vessels, okay. So order is capillaries unite to form the collecting vessels. And what happens? These collecting vessels are thicker than the lymphatic capillaries, okay, and have plenty of valves present in them. And finally, after these collecting vessels, what happens? They all unite to form a bigger vessel called as a lymphatic trunk. Trunk is bigger than the collecting vessel. And after that, the many trunks join together. They have not shown it clearly over here, but many trunks join together to form a bigger vessel, which is called as a lymphatic duct. And the largest of all is the lymphatic duct. Okay, largest of all is the lymphatic duct. And finally, you will see we have two ducts. Please pay attention. We have two ducts. I think I have a diagram for that. There was a diagram in your book. Uh, yes. Okay, look at this. We have two ducts. Okay, let me erase this first. We have two ducts, the bigger vessels, right? We have two ducts which finally bring the blood into the vein. Remember that one is called as the right lymphatic duct. So on the right hand side, this is the right lymphatic duct, which will bring the blood. I think I had a diagram to show it very clearly how it looks like. Anyways, I think so. There's a right lymphatic duct. Now, please pay attention. This is the last thing which we're going to discuss. The right lymphatic duct will bring the lymph. Now, remember the organ. It will bring the blood. Do you see all this is green in color? So, it will bring the blood from the right arm. Look at this. Right shoulder. Okay. And right side of the head, the part which is green in color, right? Right, and right side of the thorax. That is all. So this right lymphatic duct, its main job is to bring the blood, not blood, to bring the lymph from the right side of the head, from the right arm, from the right thoracic, and bring that lymph into the vein. And the second one is your thoracic duct. So whatever is left out, the left side of the face, left arm, left thoracic, both the legs, the whole abdomen, that is all drained by this thoracic duct. So this you have to remember that. Okay, so the question says that which areas are drained by thoracic duct. You will say except the right arm, except the right thoracic, except the right face, whatever areas are left out, they're all drained by the thoracic duct. We stop over here and I think tomorrow we'll continue with the lymph nodes. Yeah, the next topic is the lymph nodes. Is it clear to everyone? Any questions till now for me, guys? If you have questions, you can stay back. The rest of you can leave. Have a wonderful day ahead. Or if you want me to repeat anything, I don't have a class after this. You can stay back. Thank you, everyone. All clear. Okay, good. No questions. I hope you all are preparing for your upcoming midterm. The midterm, as I said, that the midterm is the entire cardiovascular system. Okay, and then wherever